Imagine, just for a moment, trying to explain to a 14th century monk how the spiritual architecture of the future would be built.
Oh, wow. That's quite an image.
Right. Picture this monk in his stone cloister, surrounded by illuminated manuscripts.
Probably chanting in Latin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Chanting in Latin. And living a life structured entirely by the ringing of cathedral bells and the physical presence of the church.
His whole reality is just completely institutional.
Exactly. Now, if you were to sit him down and tell him that 600 years later, an entire generation of people would find their ultimate sense of cosmic order
Right.
and their moral compass and their deepest experiences of transcendent community, not in a cathedral,
But where?
but through a blockbuster space opera featuring laser swords and a Wookiee,
Oh, man.
and through a wandering psychedelic rock band from San Francisco.
He would probably think you were possessed.
Possessed, or at the very least, completely out of your mind.
He would definitely call it heresy. I mean, without a doubt.
Oh, for sure.
But he would also be just profoundly confused by the mechanics of it all. Because to his medieval mind, the sacred is inextricably tied to the institution.
You literally can't separate the two.
Right. You have the stone building, you have the ordained clergy, you have the official scripture, and, well, you have the tithe.
The infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the very idea that the profound psychological weight of a religion could somehow be transferred into, like, the commercial vehicles of pop culture.
Like vinyl records and movie tickets.
Yeah. It would be structurally incomprehensible to him.
And yet, that is exactly what happened.
It really is.
Which brings us to today. We are exploring a truly fascinating essay we have in our stack titled Myth in the Age of Disenchantment, Star Wars and the Grateful Dead as Sacred Narratives for Generation X.
Such a great title.
It's so good. So, our mission for this deep dive is to really dissect how human beings process a massive generational loss of traditional meaning.
Because that need doesn't just go away.
Right. We are going to map out the actual structural architecture of what a myth really is. And not as a fairy tale, but as a literal survival mechanism.
A psychological survival mechanism.
Yes. And most importantly, we are going to extract some critical insights on how you, listening to this right now, might be sourcing your own sense of belonging and cosmic order today.
Which is incredibly relevant right now.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Because the human hunger for meaning doesn't just evaporate when the old structures fall down.
It has to go somewhere.
It does.
Yeah.
But to truly understand how, a George Lucas film and a jam band became sacred texts, we have to go back to the world that Generation X was actually born into.
You have to set the historical stage.
Exactly. So what did that landscape look like?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really need to examine the American landscape between, I'd say, approximately 1965 and 1980.
Okay, so that mid-century window.
Right. This is the crucial historical backdrop. We often talk about the 60s and 70s in terms of, pop culture milestones.
The moon landing, Woodstock, disco, stuff like that.
Exactly, the fun stuff. But underneath those surface events, the structural pillars of American life were undergoing a profound and, frankly, very visible collapse.
A total fracturing.
Yeah, the institutions that had organized human behavior and provided a sense of predictable reality for decades were just cracking all at once.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's too easy to just rattle off institutional collapse as a dry sociological term.
It sounds very academic.
Right. But what did that actually look and feel like for a kid growing up in a suburb in, say, 1972?
Honestly, it felt like the ground giving way.
Just falling out from under you?
Let's look at the primary structures. First, you have the rapid decline in mainstream church attendance.
Which was huge.
Massive. For the generation prior, the local church or synagogue wasn't merely a place of theological instruction. It was the absolute center of community gravity.
It's where everything happened.
Right. It was where you found your friends, where your parents networked, where you went for help if you lost your job.
The social safety net.
Exactly. And alongside that, you had the hollowing out of civic organizations.
Like what?
Places like the Elks Lodge, the Rotary Club, the local bowling leagues.
Oh, yeah, the classic mid-century clubs.
Right. These were the default gathering spaces where people physically intersected with their neighbors on a totally predictable schedule.
Right, it was the actual fabric of the neighborhood. You knew the guy who lived 3 doors down because you saw him at the pancake breakfast every third Sunday.
Precisely. You couldn't avoid your community even if you wanted to.
Okay, so church and civic life are cracking. What else?
Then we have to factor in the catastrophic loss of trust in national authority.
The big one.
Yeah. This generation watched the geopolitical narratives of their parents completely unravel. They watched the government systematically lie about the Vietnam War.
Which was actively drafting older siblings.
Right, based on a random lottery. Which, if you think about it, is perhaps the most terrifying destruction of the idea of a fair and orderly cosmos you could possibly invent.
A literal lottery to decide if you get sent to a war zone.
It's pure chaos. And then they watched the Watergate scandal unfold on live television.
Just completely exposing the highest office in the land as corrupt.
Exactly. Revealing the people in charge to be criminals, essentially.
And it wasn't just happening on television in Washington, D.C. either. It was happening inside their own living rooms.
That's a great point. The domestic sphere was collapsing, too.
Because the stable, post-war family narrative of the 1950s, the house with the white picket fence, the lifetime employment at a single company.
The marriage that lasts forever.
All of it shattered. You had skyrocketing divorce rates.
Unprecedented rates.
Yeah. You had sudden, crippling economic anxiety with the oil shocks and the stagflation of the 1970s.
Long lines at the gas pumps.
Exactly. And the sheer blinding velocity of all this social change meant that the kids who would grow up to be labeled Generation X spent their most formative, vulnerable years wandering through the wreckage.
Wreckage of institutions that simply no longer held them.
Right. It's like realizing the load-bearing walls of your house have suddenly vanished.
That's a powerful analogy.
Imagine you're a child. One day there's a roof over your head, a massive structure of rules and traditions and expectations that tells you exactly how the world works.
What is right and wrong?
Yeah, and where you fit into the grand scheme of things. And then the next day, you wake up, the walls are gone, the roof is blown off, and you were just left standing in the rain.
Looking around for shelter.
Just desperately looking for anything to cover you.
That is the central sociological and mythological argument we are dissecting today. Those failing structures, the church, the civic club, the government, the stable nuclear family, they were not just administrative bodies or like demographic trends. They functioned as containers of meaning.
Containers of meaning. I love that. That phrase is doing a lot of heavy lifting here.
It is the absolute core of the analysis. A container of meaning is an ideological and physical framework that basically holds the terror of existence at bay.
Wow.
Because when a culture is functioning properly, its institutions provide a comprehensive narrative. They tell you why you suffer, how you should behave, and who your people are.
They give you the script.
Exactly. But what happens when the container breaks?
It spills everywhere.
Right. The contents, the human need for meaning, for order, for belonging, they don't evaporate into the atmosphere. The hunger remains.
So what does it do?
It migrates.
It migrates. It packs its bags and goes looking for a new home.
Exactly.
It has to find a new vessel to pour itself into because people cannot psychologically survive in a vacuum of meaning.
We literally aren't wired for it.
Right. But if those old institutional walls fell down, what exactly were the specific bricks that needed to be rehoused?
We need to know what we're actually looking for.
Exactly. What are the ingredients of a functioning myth? Because I think we really need to clarify our terms here.
You definitely do.
We throw the word myth around in casual conversation to mean a lie or a misconception. Like the myth of the 8-hour workday.
Or the myth that carrots give you night vision.
Right, exactly. But we aren't talking about urban legends here.
No, we are discarding that colloquial definition entirely. We are using myth in the deepest anthropological, psychological, and religious sense.
The heavy stuff.
Yes, a myth is a sacred narrative that organizes a society's perception of reality.
Okay, so to understand where this myth hunger migrated, we need a rigorous, working definition of the mechanics of a myth.
And the analysis we are looking at leans heavily into the work of Joseph Campbell to do that.
The hero's journey guy.
Yes, the comparative mythologist who became unexpectedly and, honestly, massively influential during this exact same historical window.
Right, he was everywhere.
He was. Campbell is famous for identifying the monomyth, the overarching structural grammar that underlies sacred stories from indigenous folklore to ancient Greek epics to Eastern philosophies.
The classic arc, you get the call to adventure.
You initially refuse the call.
Right, you cross the threshold into the unknown, you meet a mentor, you face a terrifying trial.
And you come back fundamentally changed.
Exactly, bringing some kind of boon or wisdom back to your people.
But here is where the analysis introduces a really critical clarification. The hero's journey is best understood as merely the vehicle.
Just the delivery mechanism.
Right. It is the narrative car. But beneath the hood, running the whole system and keeping the society functioning are the actual engines of a living myth.
The actual moving parts.
Yes. The material breaks down 5 distinct, required functions that a myth must perform to successfully hold a culture together.
So if a story doesn't have all 5 of these engines running, it's just a story.
Correct.
It's not a mythic container. Let's break these down. What is the first function?
The first is cosmic order.
Cosmic order. Okay.
A functional myth has to provide a comprehensive map of reality. It has to explain why anything exists at all, what the fundamental forces of the universe are, and how human beings relate to those forces.
Like an origin story for reality itself.
Exactly. Before modern science, this meant explaining why the sun rose or why the seasons changed. But psychologically, cosmic order is about giving a person a sense that the universe is not entirely random and hostile.
That there's a point to it all.
Right. There's a design, and you are inside of it.
Okay, so a framework for reality. That makes sense.
What?
What's the second engine?
Moral archetypes.
Archetypes.
Yes. A myth cannot just hand you a list of rules and say, be good.
Right, because human brains don't process abstract rules very well.
We really don't. We process characters. So a myth has to provide figures who model the full spectrum of human possibility.
Give me some examples.
It has to show you the hero, the trickster, the sage, the mother, the shadow.
It has to physically dramatize what happens when a human being embodies those specific roles.
Precisely. So you have a template for your own behavior.
It's like giving you a cast of characters to map your own life onto.
Yeah.
You can look at a situation and ask, am I acting like the trickster right now, or am I acting like the hero?
Exactly. It makes morality legible.
Okay, what's the third
The
function?
third function is community.
Makes sense.
A myth must define who belongs. It creates the invisible bonds of a shared narrative that hold a completely disparate group of people together.
So it's the glue.
Yes. If we both believe the same myth, we are bound to each other, even if we are strangers.
Which naturally leads to the fourth function, I imagine.
It does. Ritual.
Ritual.
A myth cannot merely be a passive story you are told once a year. It has to be physically enacted through repeated practices.
You have to do something with your body.
Exactly. Rituals are the mechanism by which a community continually renews the meaning of the myth and marks the passage of time in an individual's life.
Like what kind of practices?
Baptisms, coming-of-age ceremonies, seasonal festivals, these are the physical actions that drag the myth out of the abstract and into the muscle memory of the participants.
Into the muscle memory. I really like that. And the fifth function,
The fifth function cuts across all the others. It is the hero's journey itself.
the narrative structure we talked about.
Right, that specific psychological pattern of being called out of innocence, descending into darkness, facing the ordeal, and returning whole.
It puts the whole thing in motion.
Exactly. It is the dynamic process that activates the cosmic order, the archetypes, the community, and the ritual.
Wait, let me push back on this framework for a second.
Go ahead.
Because if the hero's journey is just a storytelling vehicle that delivers these other 4 things, does that mean every single summer blockbuster that uses it is a religion? Because we see the hero's journey in everything now. It's the standard Hollywood formula.
Yeah.
Does every Marvel movie or generic fantasy novel suddenly count as a sacred text?
That is the trap.
Because a lot of people dress up as Captain America, but I don't see anyone starting a church around him.
That is a highly perceptive distinction, and it goes right to the heart of what separates, entertainment from a sacred narrative.
Right.
No, a standard action movie is not a religion. A Marvel movie might heavily borrow the hero's journey. It might even feature a villain who acts as a shadow archetype.
Sure, Thanos is a shadow figure.
But does it provide a coherent cosmic order that answers the deep existential questions of reality?
Usually no. I'm not looking to Iron Man to explain the fundamental interconnectedness of the universe.
Right. And does it generate a truly lived, interdependent community of belonging rather than just a fan base that buys merchandise?
That's a huge difference, a fan base versus a congregation.
Exactly. And does it establish a ritual that people enact to renew meaning when they are grieving or suffering?
Yeah, nobody's turning to the Avengers when they're processing their own mortality.
Precisely. To act as a genuine mythic system, a narrative must provide deep, robust, and coherent answers to all 5 of those criteria.
It has to carry real weight.
It has to bear the weight of human suffering and confusion. And that strict requirement perfectly sets up the extraordinary cultural collision that occurred in the early summer of 1977.
Let's go there. Let's dive right in. I want to transport you, the listener, back to a sticky movie theater in May of 1977.
Picture it.
You're sitting in the dark, the heavy velvet curtains pull back, the brass fanfare of John Williams hits you right in the chest, and those iconic yellow words start crawling up into the vastness of space.
Star Wars.
Star Wars. We're going to look at how this specific movie, completely by accident or by genius, stepped up to bat to fulfill those 5 functions for an entire generation.
And it all begins with that first foundational requirement.
Cosmic order.
Yes. If you critically examine the cosmology of Star Wars, the defining structural element of the universe is not the Galactic Empire.
Right.
It's not the rebellion, it's not the hyperdrive technology, or even the lightsaber.
As cool as they are.
The absolute center of the universe, the governing principle that explains how reality operates, is the Force.
An energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
The classic quote.
I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi just sits down in his dusty living room on Tatooine and literally hands the audience a complete theological framework in 2 sentences.
He really does. And we have to look at the specific mechanics of why this cosmology was so devastatingly effective for the audience receiving it.
Why did it resonate so hard?
Because the Force functions as a sacred substrate. But notice what it is not.
Okay, what isn't it?
It is not a personalized deity. There is no old man in the sky judging your actions.
Right.
It has no strict written doctrines. It does not issue a list of 10 commandments that you must blindly obey.
And it doesn't threaten you with eternal damnation if you mess up.
Exactly. It is an impersonal, omnipresent energy. It requires only that an individual is willing to quiet their own noisy ego and attend to something larger than themselves.
Just feeling the flow.
And most importantly, connecting to the Force demands absolutely no institutional intermediary.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the historical backdrop we just discussed earlier.
The collapsing walls.
Right. You have Generation X growing up with a massive, aching spiritual hunger because their load-bearing walls fell down. But simultaneously, they have a profound, hard-earned suspicion of organized religion and hierarchical authority.
They've been burned too many times.
Exactly. They watch the government lie about Vietnam. They watch the traditional churches bleed relevance. They do not want a new boss.
They were highly allergic to dogma, but desperate for meaning.
So George Lucas hands them a cosmology that perfectly threads the needle.
It's brilliant.
It's like moving from a massive mid-century mainframe computer to a personal desktop PC.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Think about how religion used to work. The mainframe was the church. It took up an entire building. It was incredibly complicated. And if you wanted to access the divine, you had to go through specialized technicians.
Priests, pastors, rabbis.
Right. People who wore special uniforms and held the administrative passwords. You couldn't just log on yourself.
You needed them to broker the connection.
But the Force. The Force is decentralized spirituality. It's a universal Wi-Fi network that is always broadcasting.
It's everywhere.
You don't need to go to a specific building on a specific day of the week to log on. You don't need a priest, and you don't have to pay a subscription fee.
You just have to learn how to quiet your mind.
Tune your own internal receiver and connect to the network that is already binding the galaxy together. It gave the individual the administrative privileges that used to belong exclusively to the priesthood.
That is a brilliant mechanical translation of what happened. It offered deep spiritual interconnectedness without the vulnerability of submitting to an institution.
It was perfectly tailored for them.
It really was. And around this perfectly calibrated new cosmology, the original trilogy assembles our second mythic requirement, the moral archetypes.
Right, the cast of characters.
The material argues that the cast of Star Wars is so remarkably complete, it reads like a deliberate Jungian mythic inventory.
It checks every box.
Every character is a perfect psychological vessel.
We can't just list these characters, though. We need to see how they function mechanically as a map for human potential. So let's start with the boy on the farm, Luke Skywalker.
Luke represents the classic seeker initiate. He is the person called from ordinary, mundane life, literally moisture farming on a barren desert planet.
Which is such a wonderful metaphor for spiritual drought, by the way.
Isn't it? He initially tries to resist the call. He wants to stay home, to fulfill his mundane chores until home is violently destroyed.
The stormtroopers show up.
Yes, the burning of his aunt and uncle's farm is the severing of his ties to the ordinary world. He is forced onto the path.
He is the ultimate audience stand-in. He is naive, he is whiny, he is looking at the horizon, wanting more, but terrified to actually take the leap.
We all relate to that.
Exactly. And then you have his guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan embodies the sage, the keeper of ancient wisdom, but his mythic role has very strict mechanical limitations.
What do you mean?
The sage is there to prepare the way. He transmits the knowledge that can be transmitted through language. He provides the talisman, the lightsaber, and then he must step aside.
Because if the sage sticks around, the hero never actually has to grow up.
Exactly.
The mentor would just fight all the battles for him. Obi-Wan would just slice up all the stormtroopers and Luke would just watch.
Precisely. And Star Wars executes this brilliantly. Obi-Wan literally disappears.
The empty robes falling to the floor.
He allows himself to be struck down at the exact moment his pupil must continue the journey alone. He transitions from an external physical protector into an internal voice.
Use the Force, Luke.
Yeah.
He literally becomes the intuition inside Luke's head.
Yes.
Okay, but Luke's wide-eyed farm boy innocence isn't enough to carry a myth for a generation of cynical post-Watergate teenagers.
He's too earnest.
Way too earnest. A functional myth has to anticipate the audience's skepticism. So how does the movie solve the problem of the cynical viewer?
It solves it with Han Solo.
The guy who shoots first.
The one and only. Han Solo is the trickster. He's the mercenary, the smuggler, the ultimate skeptic. When Obi-Wan talks about the Force, Han famously dismisses it as hokey religion and ancient weapons.
Right.
He is the absolute embodiment of the 1970s disillusioned youth.
He's the older brother who hates the government, hates the system, and only looks out for number one.
Yes, and what is vital here is that Han's reluctant conversion is a classic mythic beat all its own.
How so?
Well, he takes his reward money and leaves before the final battle. He bails.
Classic mercenary move.
But he comes back. He is the cynic who, despite all his hardened defenses, comes to believe in something larger than his own survival.
The Millennium Falcon swooping in at the last second.
Watching the ultimate cynic realize that there is a cause worth fighting for is a profound validation of the myth. It gives permission for the skeptical viewer to drop their own armor and join the faith.
It's so true. If Han Solo, the coolest, most detached guy in the galaxy, can believe in the Force, then I'm allowed to believe in it too without feeling like a sucker.
It's a psychological safety net.
Completely. Then there is Princess Leia.
Leia embodies the sovereign and the anima. In a galaxy where the political authority has become entirely corrupted by the Empire, she holds the true political authority.
She's the real leader.
But more importantly, she holds the moral clarity. She is never tempted by the dark side. She never loses sight of what is right, even when her home planet is destroyed.
Alderaan is blown up right in front of her.
And she still doesn't break. She anchors the ethical reality of the group.
And finally, you have the guy breathing heavily in the black helmet.
Darth Vader.
The ultimate bad guy.
But we must look past his function as a generic bad guy. In a deeply mythic sense, Vader is the shadow made flesh.
The shadow archetype.
Yes. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the unconscious aspect of the personality that the conscious ego does not identify in itself.
The parts of ourselves we hide.
It is the repressed darkness. Vader is the externalized, mechanized version of everything Luke fears becoming.
More machine than man.
Exactly. And the ultimate psychological weight of the story comes from the devastating revelation that this ultimate darkness is wearing the face of the Father.
Which brings us perfectly to the mechanism of the ordeal.
The descent.
Right. Because identifying the archetypes is fine, but it's not enough to just have these cool characters walking around in a spaceship.
They have to be tested.
A myth falls apart if the archetypes are never put under pressure. They have to be forced into an environment where their ordinary coping mechanisms fail.
They must go into the dark.
They have to go through the descent. And the deep dive this material takes into how the original trilogy maps onto the psychological stages of the hero's descent is absolutely staggering. Let's talk about the belly of the whale.
The belly of the whale is a very specific, ancient mythological concept.
From Campbell.
Yes. It represents the moment the hero is swallowed up by the unknown, trapped in the dark, separated entirely from the world of the living.
Usually in ancient myths, this happens in a literal cave or a dark forest or
Yeah.
descending into an underworld temple.
Exactly. But the analysis points out that Star Wars gives us perhaps the most viscerally literal belly of the whale in all of modern popular cinema.
And it arrives, of all places, in a garbage chute.
The Death Star trash compactor.
It's so gross.
Look at the exact mechanics and symbolism of that space. Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewbacca dive into a chute to escape the stormtroopers, and they are sealed inside a dark, wet, shrinking chamber.
With that weird eyeball monster pulling Luke under the water.
Right. It is literally a digestive space inside the belly of the enemy's massive, mechanized fortress. The walls begin to physically close in on them. They're being crushed together in the dark, wading through the refuse of the Empire.
And mechanically, their standard tools are completely useless.
Totally ineffective.
Han pulls out his blaster and tries to shoot the door, and the laser bolt just ricochets wildly around the room, almost killing them.
Violence does not work in the belly of the whale.
That is the crucial insight. They cannot shoot their way out. They cannot fight the walls.
I only survive through cooperation.
And through outside intervention, communicating with the droids to shut down the compactors.
Joseph Campbell could not have designed a more precise enactment of the archetype. The heroes are swallowed by the monster, contained in darkness, stripped of their weapons, and they are expelled into new life only after they learn to rely on each other.
Because they go into that chute as a fractured group of individuals bickering and fighting for dominance.
Calling each other names.
Right. And they emerge from it permanently bonded. The pressure of the compactor quite literally forged them into a fellowship.
It's structural perfection.
But the ordeal doesn't end there. The trash compactor is just the physical ordeal. We then move into The Empire Strikes Back, where we hit the psychological ordeal.
What the material calls the tower moment.
The tower moment, explain that.
The Cloud City sequence. In tarot and mythology, the Tower card represents the sudden, violent collapse of false certainty.
Okay.
It is the destruction of an illusion you had built your life upon.
So what happens to Luke?
Luke descends into this confrontation with Vader before he is spiritually ready. He ignores the warnings of his teachers, and what happens? First, he suffers a physical mutilation.
He loses his hand.
He loses his hand. But the true violence is psychological.
No, I am your father.
Exactly. He discovers that the great evil he has been fighting, the monster he thought he was destined to cleanly destroy to save the universe, is actually his own blood.
Everything he thought he knew about the shape of the conflict is completely shattered.
It's devastating.
It's a mythological collapse of his known world. Up until that second on the catwalk, he thought reality was a simple binary.
Good versus evil.
I am the good guy. Vader's the bad guy who killed my dad. I will train, I will get strong, I will kill the bad guy, and I will fix the universe.
And this raises an important question, perhaps the central psychological question of the entire mythic structure. How do you defeat an evil that is quite literally a part of your own lineage?
Yeah.
How do you destroy the monster when the monster is you?
That is heavy.
It leads us directly to the conclusion in Return of the Jedi, which the essay argues is an act of profound, radical Jungian integration.
I want to slow way down on this part because it completely changes how you view the climax of this massive action franchise.
It's not a standard action ending.
The hero's journey does not end with Luke just getting better at sword fighting, doing a backflip, and chopping his evil dad's head off.
No, it completes the arc with a much deeper, much more difficult mythic resolution.
What happens in the throne room?
In the throne room, Luke reaches the brink. He taps into his anger, he defeats Vader, he cuts off Vader's mechanical hand, mirroring his own injury.
The exact same hand.
And in that moment, he looks at Vader's severed cybernetic wrist, looks at his own cybernetic hand, and realizes the terrifying truth. If he strikes the killing blow, he simply replaces the monster.
He becomes the very thing he is trying to destroy. The cycle just continues.
So what does he do?
He throws his weapon away.
He refuses to participate in the cycle of violence.
Hmm.
He looks at the Emperor and says, I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
He claims the shadow.
He acknowledges his connection to Vader, and by refusing to kill him, by offering him compassion instead of destruction, he forces Vader to awaken and turn against the Emperor.
He saves his father's soul.
The trilogy makes a radical psychological claim here. That evil is not alien. It is estranged.
Estranged. Wow.
The shadow is not a force to simply be annihilated. It is a fractured part of the self that must be reclaimed.
So instead of just blowing up the bad guy to win the war, the ultimate mythic victory is essentially family therapy.
In a way, yes.
It's acknowledging the darkness within yourself.
That is precisely what Jungian integration requires. It is looking at the shadow, the parts of yourself you fear, despise, or repress, and bringing them into the light of consciousness.
Because if you just fight it, it gets stronger.
Right. In the Western literary tradition of the double or the shadow self, you rarely see this kind of healthy integration. Usually in stories like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the hero and the monster end up mutually destroying each other.
Right, they both die.
But here, the hero literally saves the monster by recognizing their shared humanity.
I want you to really think about that for a second. How does that concept reclaiming, rather than destroying your own shadow, change the way you view your own life?
It's incredibly practical.
It is. When you are fighting a bitter conflict with someone, or when you are struggling with a habit or a part of your own personality that you absolutely hate, what if the goal isn't to annihilate it?
What if you can't?
Exactly. What if the goal is to acknowledge it, to understand what it's trying to do, and to redeem it? That is an incredibly heavy, transformative lesson to extract from a space movie with laser swords and alien puppets.
It is a profound moral exemplar. It perfectly fulfills that second function of myth, providing a model for how a human being should navigate darkness.
It really does.
But, as the material sharply notes, there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
There is a severe structural limitation to how Star Wars delivered this myth to Generation X. It was a received myth.
Received myth, meaning it was broadcast one-directionally. You went to a dark theater, you sat in an air-conditioned room, you ate your popcorn, and you watched a myth happen to someone else on a screen.
Yes, the psychological transaction is real, and it is undeniably powerful, but the audience remains ultimately passive.
You're just a spectator.
Star Wars delivered its cosmology complete, cinematically gorgeous, and narratively closed. When the credits rolled, you had to walk out of the theater and go back to your normal life.
Back to the real world.
But for a myth to be fully realized, it needs that fourth function we discussed earlier.
Ritual.
Ritual. It needs to be physically inhabited. It needs a community enacting it.
Sweating and moving together.
And for Generation X to truly bridge the gap from a story you watch in a theater to a life you actually live with other people, the generation needed a lived myth.
Which bridges us directly out of the movie theater, out of the realm of passive consumption, and into the muddy open-air cathedrals of the Grateful Dead.
Precisely. If Star Wars gave this generation a functional cosmology and a set of archetypes, the Grateful Dead gave them a liturgy.
The physical practice.
They provided the physical ritual. The band did not broadcast their myth from a screen. They created the live, unpredictable conditions in which the myth could happen every single night differently in real time, with the audience as active participants.
Okay, let's talk about the band as an institution. Because I think to an outsider or someone who only knows the stereotypes, a Grateful Dead concert just looks like a bunch of hippies in tie-dye spinning around in the mud for 4 hours.
It looks chaotic.
It looks like total chaos. But this analysis argues that they actually provided the rigid structure of a church, just without the rigid doctrine.
They function as a sustaining institution in the most precise sociological sense.
How so?
They became the stable, rotating axis around which an entire transient community organized its life. When traditional civic organizations collapsed, the Dead Tour became the new Rotary Club.
That is wild to think about.
It became the new parish. The material points to the song Uncle John's Band from their 1970 acoustic album Working Man's Dead to make this structural reality explicit.
Such a great song.
The opening lines of the song are a literal invitation to gather by the riverside, to bring your troubles, and to think things through together.
It's a call to congregation.
But the central repeating question of the song is what matters most.
Are you kind?
Exactly. Are you kind operates as a new ethical covenant.
It replaces the catechism. It replaces the 10 Commandments.
Yes. In a traditional church, membership is defined by adherence to a specific theological creed. Do you believe in this specific virgin birth? Do you follow these specific dietary laws?
A checklist of beliefs.
The Dead stripped all of that away and replaced it with a behavioral ethos. Kindness, generosity, and participation, not dogmatic purity, became the primary criteria for membership in this new community.
I love that. If Star Wars is the sacred text you read privately at home to understand the universe, a Grateful Dead show is the town square where you actually practice the religion with your neighbor.
You show up and you do the work.
You show up, and the music acts as the medium that makes a shared life possible.
That is a perfect translation. The music was the architecture. The material mentions another song, The Music Never Stopped, which presents the band not just as entertainers, but as the organizing gravitational force of a whole world.
They bring everyone into orbit.
The lyrics describe people coming from everywhere, drawn by the sound of the playing and finding each other. But to really understand the depth of this lived myth, we have to examine the lyrics themselves.
We have to look at the words.
We have to look at the lyrical cosmos built primarily by Robert Hunter.
Robert Hunter being their primary lyricist. He wasn't on stage playing a guitar, but he was sitting in the background writing the poetry of this mythology.
Oh, yes. And the world he constructed across the Dead's catalog is vast, deeply American, and entirely internally coherent.
It has its own logic.
It is a world populated by wanderers, gamblers, trainmen, and seekers. The analysis highlights the song Ripple as perhaps the most theologically precise song in the American songbook of its era.
Ripple in still water when there is no pebble toss nor wind to blow. I mean, it sounds like a Zen koan.
It is a masterclass in theology without a personal deity.
How does the analysis break that down?
It articulates a vision of grace as an impersonal, mysterious medium. Let's look at the mechanics of that central image. A stone drop into still water, creating ripples that eventually reach a far shore.
Okay.
But notice the physics of a ripple. The energy doesn't get there by a direct, commanding path. It emanates outward in all directions.
It spreads through the medium.
This perfectly describes how sacred meaning and grace move in a world that no longer believes in a personal, intervening God sitting on a cloud.
Right.
Grace doesn't travel from God down to the believer in a straight, authoritative lightning bolt.
No.
It moves through an interconnected field. It arrives where it must, through the water that connects everyone.
It is theology without a dictator. It is an absolute trust in the interconnectedness of the universe.
Which, weirdly, mechanically sounds exactly like the Force.
It absolutely does. They are parallel cosmologies developed in the exact same historical window, answering the exact same psychological need.
That is mind-blowing.
But where Lucas put his cosmology in a galaxy far, far away, the Grateful Dead took theirs out onto the American highway.
They grounded it.
The material delves deeply into the road songs tracks, like Truckin', Ramble on Rose, Friend of the Devil, I Know You Writer.
In travelogues.
These songs do something very subtle but sociologically vital. They take the deadhead, the fan who dropped out of college or quit their job to follow the band from city to city, and they reframe their identity.
They stop being a societal dropout or a bum, and they become a pilgrim.
Precisely. They become the latest seeker in an ancient, noble lineage of wandering.
The analysis compares it to turning the American highway into the Camino de Santiago.
Yes, the Camino de Santiago is a famous medieval Catholic pilgrimage route in Spain.
People still walk it today.
They do. People would walk hundreds of miles, enduring hardship, not to relocate, but for the spiritual transformation of the journey itself. By invoking a parade of historical and folkloric figures in their songs, the Dead gave their rootless followers a sense of historical anchor.
A tradition to belong to.
Following the band wasn't running away from reality, it was participating in a great American pilgrimage. The journey itself, the movement, became the point.
But belief is cheap until it is enacted, right?
Absolutely.
You can sing about being kind, you can sing about interconnectedness and sharing the journey all you want, but how does that actually manifest when you're standing in a muddy parking lot in Ohio in the rain?
Where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. This brings us to the physical economic practices of the community, the gift economy.
This is where the lived theology becomes undeniable. The culture that spontaneously generated in the parking lots surrounding the Grateful Dead constituted a radical spiritual practice.
Let's talk about the tapes.
Let's look at the mechanics of the tape trading network. The band made a highly unusual decision for the music industry. They allowed fans to bring professional recording equipment to the shows and plug directly into the soundboard's mix.
Which was unheard of. Most bands would sue you for that.
Fans would record the massive improvisational concerts, and then they would trade these cassette tapes through the mail network across the country.
But the absolute, unbreakable, sacred rule of the community was that you never, ever sold them for money.
Never! They were freely shared. You sent blank tapes and returned postage to a stranger, and they copied the music for you.
A completely free exchange.
It became a sacred currency that existed entirely outside of capitalism. And then you have the phenomenon of the miracle ticket.
Right.
I need a miracle.
Yeah.
You would see people walking through the parking lot before a sold-out show, holding up a single finger, hoping someone would just give them a ticket.
The practice of giving away your extra, highly valuable tickets to complete strangers in need rather than scalping them for profit.
Instead of making $50, you just hand it over.
The entire informal economy of the parking lot, the Shakedown Street, was based on the idea that abundance should be passed along rather than hoarded.
Pay it forward.
The operating lived assumption of this community was that whatever you needed, a ticket, a ride to the next city, a meal would eventually arrive, as long as you showed up and actively participated in the flow of generosity.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, sitting in traffic or washing dishes right now?
Why should they care?
Exactly. Why does a 1980s parking lot economy matter? I think it shows that true, resilient community isn't built on rigid governance or forced compliance.
It really isn't.
It is built on a shared ethos and radical generosity. When you trust that giving something of value away freely, like a ticket or a tape or your time, will ultimately enrich the community that you yourself are a part of, you are enacting a theology.
You are
proving that the myth of interconnectedness is real by putting your own skin in the game. You are living it out.
The material phrases it beautifully. A lived belief that generosity circulates through the world and returns.
That is so good.
That is an astonishing sociological achievement for a rock band's fan base to organically manifest. But perhaps the most striking mythological function the Grateful Dead fulfilled, and the one that modern secular society struggles with the most, was how they handled the darkest, most terrifying part of the human experience.
Mortality.
Mortality.
Right. American culture, especially as we moved into the late 20th century, got incredibly good at hiding death.
We push it away.
We sanitize it. We move dying people into hospitals behind closed doors. We use soft euphemisms. We don't say he died. We say he passed away or we lost them, like they misplaced their keys.
We avoid the reality of it.
But the dead did not do that.
They held death front and center. They refused to look away. The analysis points to songs like Box of Rain, which bassist Phil Lesh wrote with Robert Hunter as Lesh's father was actively dying of cancer.
Such a beautiful, heartbreaking song.
The song does not offer comfort by promising some magical transcendence. It doesn't deny the pain.
What does it do?
It offers comfort through presence and shared impermanence. The lyric says, "Such a long, long time to be gone and a short time to be there." The rain falls on everyone. You cannot stop the rain, but you can stand in it together. That is the condition of life. And acknowledging it honestly together is the only real consolation.
And it's not just one song. You have Black Peter, Broke Down Palace, Stella Blue. He's gone.
These songs sit with mortality the exact way a functional ancient liturgy does. They don't try to explain it away with neat theological bows. They keep the dead present at the feast.
They give the community a vocabulary for their grief.
Exactly. Even the band's name itself was a deliberate choice made with wide open eyes.
The Grateful Dead. It's not just a spooky psychedelic name they picked out of a hat because it sounded cool, right?
No, it is a highly specific ancient figure from global folklore.
Let's hear the folklore.
The motif of the Grateful Dead exists in various cultures. It refers to a folktale where a wandering traveler comes across the unburied corpse of a stranger who died with unpaid debts. The traveler uses his own meager funds to pay the debts so the stranger can be given a proper burial. Later in the story, when the traveler is facing an impossible trial or certain death, the spirit of that properly mourned dead person returns as a guide and a magical helper to save the living traveler.
That gives me chills.
Every single time the band played a show under that name, they carried that mythological awareness into the room.
A properly mourned dead person acting as a guide for the living. That is incredibly beautiful. And you really saw that culmination when Jerry Garcia died in 1995.
The outpouring of emotion was staggering.
The grief of that community was absolutely massive, but it was completely inseparable from its gratitude.
Which is a deeply theological posture.
Hmm?
Formal religions spend centuries trying to teach their followers how to hold profound grief and profound gratitude simultaneously.
And the Deadhead community did it organically.
They did. But to fully grasp how they achieved this, we must look at the actual ritual mechanism of the shows themselves.
The music itself.
The long improvisational jams, the musical sections that could stretch out for incredible lengths of time.
Right, the famous noodle dancing. Yeah, songs like Dark Star or the other one where they might just play a single chord vamp for 30 straight minutes.
Yes.
To my parents or to anyone uninitiated, it just sounds like self-indulgent noise.
To the outsider, yes, it does. But the material analyzes these extended jams as ancient functional incubation rituals.
Incubation rituals, what does that mean?
Incubation is the deliberate mechanical use of sustained, repetitive stimuli to alter consciousness. Let's look at how modal music actually works.
Okay, getting into the music theory.
Just a bit. In standard pop music, you have a chord progression that builds tension and then resolves. Your brain anticipates the resolution.
Like waiting for the chorus to hit.
Exactly. But modal music, which the Dead heavily utilized during these jams, doesn't rely on standard functional harmony. It hovers. It explores a single scale or mode without constantly pushing toward a resolution.
So because the music doesn't have that traditional tension and release structure, your brain stops anticipating the end of a phrase.
Exactly. And without that constant anticipation of the next structural beat, your sense of linear time begins to slip.
You just get lost in it.
The boundary between your ordinary, everyday, anxious consciousness, the ego that worries about paying rent or what you look like, begins to dissolve. You are forced into the pure present moment.
Wow.
That is mechanically how a 30-minute jam bypasses the ego, meaning it was not being handed down from a pulpit. It was being made collectively in real time by the musicians and the audience locking into that shared frequency together.
It was a literal mechanism of transcendence.
It was.
Okay, so we've seen the full architecture. We've seen how Star Wars gave this generation a decentralized cosmology and a cast of archetypes to watch on a screen.
Right.
And how the Grateful Dead gave them a physical practice, an economy of generosity, and a ritual to inhabit in the mud.
The lived experience.
The Force explained the universe,
Yeah.
and the music made it bearable to live in. It sounds like a perfect, flawless system.
But
But
we have to be impartial here.
we have to examine the whole picture. Both of these phenomena provided brilliant answers for a lost generation, but what were the missing pieces? What did these pop culture vessels completely fail to carry?
This is where the analysis becomes highly critical, and necessarily so. For all their brilliance, neither of these systems provided the ethical accountability structures that formal religion, at its best, supplies to a community.
Right. There is a massive functional difference between believing in the Force and actually having to go to confession every Sunday and admit what you did wrong.
Exactly. The material phrases it sharply. No one confessed to a Jedi,
Huh? That's true.
and no deadhead, spinning in the parking lot, faced a community of elders who knew their personal history, who knew their specific flaws, and who held them to account across decades.
The elders are missing.
The illusion of consequence was entirely missing from the mythology.
They offer transformation without obligation. You get the spiritual high of the music, you get the deep sense of belonging to the tribe, you get the cool clothes and the insider jargon, but you don't actually have any governance.
You have grace without consequence.
Grace without consequence. But I want to linger on this because I want to push back a little.
Oh, they push back.
Is that a feature or a bug? If nobody is holding you accountable, if there are no elders telling you when you've messed up or hurt someone, is it actually a functional, resilient community?
That's the big question.
Or is it just a really fun, extended club where you can bail the second things get hard or the second someone asks you to do something you don't want to do?
That is the exact vulnerability of pop mythology. It is undeniably thinner than what it replaced.
It lacks the structural steel.
When the music stops, or when the movie franchise ends, who actually comes to visit you in the hospital when you are sick? Who tells you that you are treating your spouse poorly? Who demands that you grow up?
It's the exact same problem we see today. We still desperately want community without the boss.
We see it online all the time.
Exactly. We join highly specific subreddits or Discord servers or online fandoms, and we feel this massive sense of belonging. But the second someone challenges us, or the second the group demands something uncomfortable from us, we just mute the channel.
Block the person or leave the server entirely.
If a myth doesn't demand anything uncomfortable from you, is it actually transforming you, or is it just validating your ego?
That is a brilliant modern parallel. A myth that costs you nothing cannot sustain you when true tragedy strikes.
It just washes away.
But the material contextualizes this historical flaw with deep empathy. We have to understand the specific Gen X choice.
We have to go back to the historical backdrop we started with, the collapsing walls.
Yes. This was a generation profoundly traumatized by the visible, often hypocritical failure of rigid institutional authority.
Right, they had reasons to be suspicious.
They watched the architects of the Vietnam War demand their loyalty. They watched the traditional nuclear family demand conformity while suffocating their parents.
So they ran the other way.
So naturally, and entirely understandably, they preferred their containers of meaning to be loose. They wanted belonging, but they were terrified of being trapped by institutions that had proven themselves untrustworthy.
They kept one foot out the door.
They deliberately chose mythic systems that asked for their participation, but not their submission.
We want the community, but we refuse to have a boss. Given what they lived through, it makes total logical sense that they built their spiritual houses out of movies and music instead of bricks and mortar.
It was a survival strategy.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground here today. Let's bring it all together. What is the grand synthesis of this deep dive?
Let's summarize it.
We've seen that the human appetite for cosmic order, for moral archetypes, for ritual, and for community, it precedes religion. Religion is just one of the historical vessels that holds it.
It's a fundamental human trait.
When the old stories in America went silent, when the load-bearing walls of the 1950s collapsed, Generation X didn't suddenly stop needing meaning. Human beings cannot survive without it.
They just used the materials they had at hand.
Exactly. They took a summer blockbuster space opera and a wandering rock and roll jam band, and they ingeniously retrofitted them to figure out how to live.
It's incredible resourcefulness.
Star Wars taught them courage, fellowship, and how to face the shadow inside themselves without destroying it. The Grateful Dead taught them radical generosity, physical presence, and how to carry the heavy weight of mortality with grace.
It proves, ultimately, that myth has always worked through the available materials of a given culture. The ancient Greeks used the oral tradition of the Trojan War.
Medieval Europe used the Arthurian legends of the Grail.
And a 20th century generation, raised on television and rock and roll, used what it had. And the remarkable thing is not that these pop culture vessels were imperfect, because all human mythic vessels are ultimately imperfect, but that they actually worked.
They held the water.
Millions of people successfully organized their inner lives, their ethics, and their communities around these two systems.
Which leads us with a profound and, honestly, a slightly unsettling question for you, the listener, to explore on your own when this audio stops.
The final takeaway.
We established that the myth hunger never dies. It always migrates to the available materials of a culture. For Gen X, sitting in the rain after the load-bearing walls fell down, the available materials were cinema and rock and roll.
But what about today?
Exactly. What are the available materials right now? If an entire generation's mythic vessels are being built entirely inside algorithmic social media feeds or within highly fragmented niche internet subcultures, what kind of hero's journey is an algorithm writing for you?
That is a terrifying thought.
If the Force was a universal network that brought a fractured galaxy together, and the Grateful Dead parking lot was a town square built on radical physical generosity, what happens to a society when our shared myths are perfectly mathematically tailored by code to isolate us?
To validate our pre-existing rage, rather than bring us to the town square.
Are we building actual containers of meaning or just highly personalized echo chambers? Take a hard look at where you are getting your cosmology.
It is the essential psychological question of our current era.
Well, on that note, we want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you some new lenses to look through, whether you're watching a movie, listening to a song, or just trying to figure out your own hero's journey in the modern world. Until next time.